So at 500, we realize that talent is everywhere, though opportunity is not. With 2.8 billion in assets under management in 51 portfolio companies valued at 1 billion or more, we have a wealth of knowledge and experience to pass on to support our firm's mission to uplift people and economies around the world through entrepreneurship. BAM, it's our bootcamp for Accelerator managers and is Silicon Valley's leading training program for Accelerator managers who want to take their founder programs to the next level. So for all of you running founder-focused programs, whether you want to define the Accelerator strategy for your corporate or already run an accelerator, we've worked with many types of accelerators in the past, some of which include private and government accelerators to university incubators and venture studios. If this sounds aligned with your vision, BAM applications are currently open for early admission for our next program taking place in January 2023 in San Francisco. And the early application deadline is nearing. So that will be November 1st of our last round of early applications. And I'll include the early application in the chat just after this intro. So without further ado, I'll introduce Vanessa Samaniego, the education team's senior manager of operations, who will be moderating your questions today, as well as our 500 global panel, Carrie Liao, who is regional director of Asia Pacific region, Leonard Lee, the head of Accelerator operations, and Lucia Ferrero, regional director of Americas. Now I'll pass it over to Vanessa.
Thanks so much, Chris. And thanks for everyone who's joining us here today. We're really excited to be able to host this panel and share a few of our inner workings here at 500 with you all, because I think we can relate to what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. So I will let everyone on the panel briefly introduce themselves. And also, because the title of our panel today is the Accelerator Manager's Guide to Putting Out Program Fires, I'll also ask them to share maybe one fire that they've already put out this week, and it's only Wednesday. So I'll let Lucia get us started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucia. Like Chris said, I am the regional director for the Americas, even though I've been working on some other regions as well in the past few months. One fire that I put out this week is we have a program that is about to start in about 2 weeks, and our co-working space is still under construction. So every day that passes by, we just have to continue to get updates to make sure that it is going to be open by the date of the program start. Great to have you all here today.
All right, Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Actually, now that Lucia mentioned it, I have the exact same problem in one of the other programs. We actually just opened. We started a program yesterday in a space that is still under construction. So I think that's a very common problem we're all going to see. I'm Carrie. I'm based in Singapore, and I work with Lucia as well as many of our other colleagues here to run programs for founders everywhere. So I'm very excited to share some of the things that we personally face, I think, on the ground, and hope to learn from you guys too.
Last but not least, Leonard.
Hi, everyone. My name is Leonard. I help run the Global Accelerator, which is also formerly known as the SF Accelerator. So if you've heard of that. I'm also based in SF and previously was a founder. So went through 500 as a founder way back when. And so have a little bit of experience on both the founder side and now the venture side running this program. So that's it. Oh, and then in terms of the fire we put out, one of our founders, which is coming for our demo day, as well as some other in-person events, is trying to get a visa to come to the US. And they are apparently having a difficulty landing an interview spot for a visa until 2024. So we're trying to expedite that somehow. So
I feel you on the visa situation, Leonard. Well, we are going to get started now with the official panel. And we wanted to talk about a lot of the challenges that we're facing, because again, we understand that we're all in a similar boat. So for the first bucket of questions that I wanted to ask is the current challenges that we're facing of transitioning right now post-COVID from online to in-person or hybrid, and where we can still really maintain the value of these situations and how we communicate that to the founders that you're trying to involve in your programs. So just in terms of the online versus in-person component, I'm going to get started with Lucia, and I would love to hear a little bit about how you evaluate that value and what are some of your current thinkings around that.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think this is something that we all were forced to think about in the past few years. And now that we're going back to normal, I think it needs to continue to be in our minds just because of the reality of the world. It really did change and we have to adapt. So I guess, I mean, online, in-person, hybrid, I think they all have different value that they offer, and there's really not a one size fits all. You know, for 500, for instance, our programs are extremely global. So there's some moments where, like Leonard mentioned, where if we have 5% or like 5 of the 20 companies that are participating that need visas in order to even get to the in-person location, that may create some challenges, that may delay some of the process. So in those kinds of moments, we just evaluate and we say would like a hybrid program work best, where maybe they can get their visa the last 3 weeks of the program if we do those in person, and then they can come and join us. So it's really like by program that we kind of like evaluated. And I think that everybody here in the audience, you know your ecosystem, you know the type of companies that would apply to your programs, and you know which ones could be a good fit. So if you have a lot of people that are applying from the same city or the same geography, an in-person component may be a little bit better because you have the easiness that everybody's in the same location. If you have, like our programs, you know, people from not only a specific region, but different regions globally, maybe a hybrid component will work well, where you do not compromise on that in-person component, but you also offer some weeks of flexibility in the middle so that people can go back to their families and whatnot. And then there's always the fully virtual component, which is the epitome of convenience, but also you have to get a little bit creative in the social and networking side of things so that you don't miss and sacrifice on that human component. So some questions that we ask ourselves as we're trying to determine the format of a program can be, do our participants need different levels of flexibility, or are they all in the same location or city? Do we have the budget to plan for special events or retreats if we were to have a mostly virtual program? Are the mentors and our team members equipped with tools and resources to build community in a hybrid model? So everything from like an AV setup to crowd management skills, like can our team do that? And then what do the founders need most? Is it community, is it connections, or is it education? So those are some of the tools that we use to kind of determine what format makes most sense for our programs.
Thanks so much, Lucia. I really love how you broke it down and gave some very specific frameworks of how you can evaluate the situation and the needs of your program and participants, most importantly. And that's something that at our upcoming BAM program that we do, as well as share a lot of these frameworks to be able to outline kind of our expertise and what we deliver for different programs and clients around the world, and something that we're looking to share in this type of program, the one that Chris mentioned earlier. Carrie, I'll let you briefly as well add on to this question of hybrid versus virtual versus in-person, and see what your thoughts have also been along this learning journey.
I think Lucia covered most of it, right? It is interesting because when a lot of us came back into in-person programs post-COVID, we honestly thought it was going to be the same as it was in 2018, 2019, right? But it isn't, right? Because a lot of things can happen online today. Like this seminar, for example, we wouldn't be doing this in person. Everyone is dialing in from different places, right? So we also, like Lucia said, we thought about the value of what we're bringing. Sometimes being online, it really does have its value, right? And this is one of the benefits. You can see people globally from everywhere in the world. But then also rethinking, why would I make someone travel to come in person when they can do things online? So then that kind of forces us to challenge the way we create experiences in real spaces, real time with people. What are they getting out of this 2 hours that they're spending with each other rather than being online? So I think that's also something different. And I think one of the key things that Lucia brought up, which I think is so important, is community. And we have tried to build communities online. We really have, right? In different methods, different platforms and tools. And somehow the value of being there in person, seeing that person's real height, real face, shaking his hand is just very, very different. And I think we're also learning constantly through the programs we're running what that really means and how we can then, I think, create other kind of experiences that can also bring that value back.
And that's perfect. And like you said, online, there's no visa situation. So that definitely helps a lot. But the value of community is so important. And so, like you said, even 1 hour with other people in person can do a lot for a program and the bonding that takes place. So thanks both for sharing your feedback and some of those frameworks that are very specific to our audience. For the next question, I would love to get and dive a little bit more into deal flow. I know that creating the right leads and finding the right qualified founders to apply to programs is incredibly important for just the quality of the programs themselves and also what you're looking to contribute to that ecosystem. So I would love to tackle this question and get started with Leonard and see what are some of your thoughts around how do you find the right founders? How do you get them to apply? How do you convince them that this is the right path for them as well?
Definitely. And I think one of the biggest challenges is always finding the best founders. So figuring out how to get in contact with them. To be honest, a lot of our programs, we've run 90 programs globally, or over 90 at this point. And so really trying to figure out how to tap into the local ecosystem for each area that we actually build in is very key. And that actually develops over time. Like this is not something that necessarily happens from day one, unless you already have built-in networks in that region. So many times we're finding local talent that will be on our team that really is already tapped into the networks there. And so we'll get a lot more qualified founders and startups to join. We get a ton of referrals in. I'll speak at least to the Global Accelerator. So we have a number of referrals that come in through our portfolio companies, a number of referrals that go straight to our general partners or anyone else that kind of are already pretty well known. And so, everyone's going to be a little bit different in terms of how they approach this, but ultimately establishing that relationship with the founder community in that region is going to be probably the at least one of the key things that we try to establish in a lot of the markets that we enter into. So, and to be fair, it'll be personalized a little bit for each market. So each market will see slightly different ways of attracting those founders. But we've done almost everything, from in-person events, social, just obviously having founders who currently are in that market, just getting close to them, whatever it might be. But there's many ways to kind of look at this. So.
And I think just to follow up very quickly, because I know that when we spoke previously, this was also a question of interest to you, is convincing founders that this is the right path. Do you mind also addressing that a little bit, and then we can hand it over to Lucia as well?
For sure. So we have, I'll give you an example. I used to run another program, which was based in Asia, and the founders were trying to expand to the US. So a lot of times, they may have already had product market fit in that region. But one of the things that they didn't really understand until they went through our program was, hey, the local market in the US is very different from how you're attacking the Asia market. And so even in the initial conversations, when we had really strong companies that were applying, some of these companies were Series A companies already. So they may not see the value in an accelerator, but when it becomes more clear what the challenges are that they would be facing when entering a new market, that's where some of these companies decided to join. And ultimately, going back maybe even to the first question, we really pushed in person in that case because of the fact that it's really, one of the things that I noticed was founders may assume that they can expand into separate markets, but until you're actually on the ground talking to customers, being in the same time zone even, they don't really get a sense for whether or not the value proposition is the same in their home market versus the new markets that they're entering. And so that's why, at least for some of the programs that I've run, that's what we focused on, was really getting them into that new market so that they could learn a lot more. And then it became quite clear the value of that accelerator. So that's obviously one. I think for 500, we obviously have a unique brand in the sense that we are global, right? And so we're located in so many different regions. And I think a lot of founders come to us because of that when they're, especially in emerging markets, trying to expand to new markets. And we have that ability to kind of help with boots on the ground in the different regions that they're trying to build into.
Thanks, Leonard. I think that touches on a lot of points there, just the local versus global nature and just how we can be attractive and remain attractive to the right types of founders. And like you said, we're always looking for the best. Lucia, I would love to hear your take as well, since you are working regionally and seeing some of the challenges there for finding the right startups and really tapping into different ecosystems.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think we can all agree that deal flow is the bloodstream of our programs. I mean, our programs wouldn't run if we didn't have great startups participating in them. So this is something that we definitely pay a lot of attention to. And I think just from speaking of experience and in some of the different geographic locations that we've been, I think some of the causes of low deal flow that we've seen are first of all, founders have many options. So depending on the maturity of your ecosystem, if there are like 3, 4, 5 different accelerators that are happening at the same time, it is great because, there's a lot of like supply for that demand, but also with a lot of options comes kind of like that confusion sometimes where you have to find creative ways to show the value, to convince the founders why your program is different. So it's not necessarily about competing with other accelerators, because at the end of the day, I really do believe that there's room for everyone and that founders will find the program that better fits their needs. But I think one way that we've dealt with this is collaborating. So if you have identified the different players in the ecosystem where you know that, well, if maybe this person is not the best fit for my program, maybe I can refer them to the other program, but then that way you also get some deal flow. I think that's something that we've been able to do. So you have to get creative as to how you position yourself and your program and show that value. Another piece of or like another cause that we've seen of low deal flow is the level of the startups in the ecosystem is not where you need it to be. So you may not have a lot of startups that are in that accelerator level. So one solution that we've done or some things that we've tried with this one is, again, taking an assessment of the whole ecosystem and trying to partner with those organizations that are maybe focusing on ignition programs or on ideation programs or pre-accelerators, even high school, universities, in order to try to build that deal flow. That's a longer game, but eventually it would probably get to you if you help supporting those types of situations. And then marketing obviously is a big one as well. If you're new to a market and if nobody knows who you are, like a brand like 500, as recognizable as we think it is, not in all markets they really know who we are. So we have to get creative and really find ways to let startups know about our program. And then just touching really quickly on the how do you convince them that it's worth it. I think one thing that has really worked for us is just showing them, testimonials speak better than anything. So if you have people that have been part of your program before, if you have success stories, if you can put those stories to a face and have them tell the story for themselves and not even just you doing it, I think that has really helped us in deal flow in different markets. But it's a lot of experimenting and a lot of testing, because what works in one market doesn't necessarily work in the other.
No, that's perfect. And because this is such a big topic, Carrie, is there anything else that you would like to add here?
Yeah, I do have one thing that I think adds on to what the two of them have already mentioned, right? Is actually what Lucia kind of mentioned is marketing. I've learned that in different markets, there are different channels. I always just assume that social media are just like the main stuff, right? LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. In other countries, they use different platforms. In Cambodia, I realized that Telegram was a really big channel for marketing. And I also realized in Korea, there's something called cafes. These are actually online blogs, right? Where people come together and they do things. So I think learning that and trusting your local team, I mean, in different places that you guys are in, I think knowing your channels very well, that would really help you as well, because that's where the flow really comes from. In some places, they don't use LinkedIn, right? So also being aware of these facts.
No, that's a really great point. I know that as well on my programs myself. I know that there are certain markets where I can only get a hold of participants on WhatsApp. So I think that, like you said, it's knowing the market, being able to really tap into that, collaborating, as Lucia mentioned. And then Lucia, you also mentioned really knowing your accelerator superpower and knowing how to bring that out in marketing, in branding, and also for the opposite reason of in case someone doesn't match what you're looking for, you can refer them to another person. And that is a topic that we really address at the bootcamp for accelerator managers, because knowing your superpower is where everything else stems, is how to differentiate yourself, how to make sure that you can attract and find the right startups that way. So that accelerator thesis is really important to what we teach and I think what we do at 500 firsthand. So with that, thank you for really kind of diving into that nitty gritty for deal flow. Let's jump to another good topic, which is curriculum building and program customization. So there's a lot of questions around this. We've seen the conversations internally, externally of what are benefits to having a batch program versus rolling. How do we approach this for the markets today and for the current needs of founders? And just everything that goes into that, what is it that's going to provide the most value through this curriculum? So I will get started with Carrie on this one.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. This is a very interesting question because I constantly still ask myself this question every day, in the value of when we design a program, right? What that really means. And I think both Lucia and Leonard mentioned this a little bit before, is that when we think about the founders that are coming into program, we think about like at what level they are, what stage they are, how do we then approach customization, right? So a lot of programs that like Lucia and myself run, they are by batches, simply because of the way the ecosystems are in these countries that we're in, right? And each batch has a bit of we're learning from each batch as we go along, right? In I think Leonard's program, for example, we keep applications open and rolling, right? Simply because there is so much deal flow coming, and we're looking at, I think, bringing these batches together as well. So we're also learning from these two different models, in that some of the batches that have finished, right, in the countries that we're in, when do we bring them back? How do we bring them back? I think Lucia has some examples on that also. In terms of curriculum, constant challenge, obviously, we always ask ourselves, right, what is the success metric of every program we run, right? At the end of it, what is success to us and what is success to the founders? Is it that they raise money successfully? Is it that they close new deals in the country they're expanding to? Is it that, they're part of a bigger community now that they can get access to at the end of the day? Or is it learning, right? I think one of the models we always think about is what these things really mean. And at the beginning, we start designing it that way. So curriculum, I think a lot of us maybe think of it as, just content, right? It is just topics that we're teaching, right? It's actually more than that. We kind of see it as how everything kind of comes together in the limited time that we have with the founders, right? If we do fly them into a country, let's say the 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks that they spend with us, that's how much time we have to actually make the impact on the success we want to see. We have started also rethinking, I think, a lot of the ways we do things, and instead of just sitting down for 2-hour lectures, right, we're recreating the way we think about these experiences, right? So a lot of it is based around events and activities and meetings, so that these founders are able to get the value that they really want out of it. The program that Lana spoke about actually was really interesting because we actually did fly those founders, right? The founders flew themselves, I think, to the US, spent 2 months there, and we actually saw the value of what they got out of it, right? The meetings that they managed to close. And a lot of them actually closed deals back home in Singapore, because they were away for so long. They realized the intensity of it and being around people who were doing the same thing, and that was really important. So I think sum up my own answer is that there's no one fixed curriculum for any program you're running. And even if you run one successful batch, I would say the thing is to think about whether the next batch is going to be suitable for this curriculum you're running also.
Thanks, Carrie. I think that's a really excellent point to close on for your statement, just because, like you said, there is no one size fits all. It's a combination of different factors, and calculating the most optimal output for your particular program and what you're trying to create for your community, for your founders. I will also love to hear from Leonard, since you work with a little bit of a different model of having rolling admissions for the Global Accelerator program.
Definitely. So we actually switched to the rolling format in 2020. So I think that was one of those decisions where we realized that we were actually missing out on a lot of great companies that were applying just as we sort of kicked off a new batch. And so, especially because it's an investment program for us, we invest into those companies. We didn't want to miss out on some of the great companies that we were seeing. And we fortunately had enough deal flow that it sort of made sense to bring in, 5 to 10 to 15 companies per month. And they can sort of start in a smaller cohort and still get a little bit of that batch experience without necessarily having to wait, another 6 months for them to enter. And then what ended up happening was in the previous model, many of those great companies, they would actually accelerate really quickly in those 6 months. And so they were already outgrew sort of the accelerator at that point. And so that was one of the reasons why we wanted to switch this model. It doesn't, work for every accelerator program. We obviously have many programs that follow like a more strict batch format. And I know even one of our investment accelerator programs, they actually essentially have a new batch or cohort starting every 3 or 4 months. So it's pretty quick. They do, I think, 3 batches a year. So it goes one right after another. So they try to minimize the amount of downtime between great companies that they see. One of the nice things about rolling, to be honest, is also, we don't have to hit like a quota in terms of how many startups have to go through that batch. So we just get the best companies in when we are ready. So that is definitely a plus. I would say the con, obviously, as many can attest to, is obviously it's a little bit harder to build sort of that community amongst all the founders, right? One of the challenges is really making sure that the founders get to meet the other founders in their batch. And that, to be honest, is one of the biggest benefits of any accelerator program, is meeting like-minded founders who are really strong at what they do, and really challenging and kind of helping one another through whatever they've learned. I'm still really good friends with many of the friends that I went through the batch with, and we still work on each other's business problems. And those are relationships that could only have been developed through the accelerator program. And so that's part of the reason why we try to emulate that a little bit in the rolling format, by having founder retreats where founders will come to San Francisco and meet all the other founders at a given point. And they undoubtedly say one of the best benefits of that format is they meet such great people in such a short amount of time. And I've gotten comments like, I've made friends in 4 days that will last me a lifetime, right? Similar things to that, where it's kind of remarkable, that we can take some of the best benefits of an in-person program and sort of compress it like that. But that's at least the rolling format. I think there's a lot more detail obviously on there. But yeah, so I can talk a little bit about customization of our programs as well. I would say, or at least the curriculum overall, we focus on a couple key things that I think every accelerator program probably needs to focus on, which is founders are always coming to us for fundraising. Many of them are first-time founders. They don't know how to fundraise. They're looking for connections. They're looking for the demo day to really kind of either kick off or finish their fundraise. And then also growth, right? Or finding product market fit. Those are sort of the key elements. That's obviously at a very high level. We go into a lot of detail. So even let's say from a growth perspective, we may dive into how to run sales. How do you actually figure out the sales process? What does an actual sales meeting look like? And there's a part where we have such great mentors that have done this before. They've done it at early stage startups or their founders themselves. So they know exactly the process that has worked for them. And then the founders really learn that process, and they're able to accelerate their own way of selling or doing marketing or whatever it is that can kind of help them from that perspective. But ultimately, I think the details matter a lot. So if it's too high level, it can kind of wash over a lot of the founders, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I get it. And then when it comes to actually applying it, they're at a loss. They're like, I don't know how to do that. Like, what does that actually look like? Even simple things like developing a financial model. Yeah, okay. I know how to, I've seen a financial model before, but when they actually build it, like, wait, what are the assumptions that need to go into this? How does it affect, sort of our 3-year plan, et cetera, right? And that obviously feeds into your fundraise. So the details are critical to getting good curriculum. And so we spend a lot of time in one-on-ones, both with mentors and ourselves, to really hone some of the material that we go over so that they're really practicing most of what we teach them. So that way it's just hitting home a lot better. So that's it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we haven't even touched on mentors, and we're not today. It's all of these topics can be 1 hour itself, can be a full day itself. We just wanted to cover some of the bigger questions from just other accelerator managers that we've chatted with over time that we thought would be of greater interest. And like you said, these programs are all about the details, and they're all about really making sure that they run smoothly. How do you address the key questions from founders and make sure that you're adding value to their work, because they are very busy. And so that's why we have to work hard to remain relevant. Last question, because we are coming up on time, unfortunately, but I do want to get to the demo day question. So in today's environment, and Carrie mentioned it, there was a lot that happened during COVID where everything was online. There were so many platforms. Everyone had to move to really find their investor audience online. And now I think there's a lot of different versions that we're experimenting with, others are experimenting with. There's even the question itself of, is a demo day needed? Is this something that really helps founders at the end of the day? So I would like to dive a little bit into this, and then we'll get into Q&A from the audience. But I will hand it over to Carrie again to discuss a little bit the pros and cons, and even if there's alternative ideas that you think might be useful for the audience to know that aren't strictly demo days only.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's interesting because we had to learn and relearn very quickly over time, right? So in-person demo days, we always thought people would come, they would get interest from investors, they would then have conversations after, and then they would go off and then they'll raise money, which was great, right? Then when things became virtual, we realized that, I think it was so difficult to get commitment, right, from actual investors for our founders, because people can just watch this recording after. They don't actually need to say, I'm giving you money right now, and how's that going to happen also? And we realized that relationships are not built that way also, when you actually have founders pitching through a screen and then, expecting them to say, I'm going to close this round. So it was really hard. We experimented with different platforms. As you can tell from a lot of our demo days that we share after, we tried different ways, different platforms to get more engagement for the founders. And then now post-COVID, we're back in the in-person again. A lot of people don't actually turn up anymore, because they realize that they can still see all these things after. It is going to be recorded, it is going to be live streamed. So we are being challenged, I think, constantly think about the way interactions happen, and what founders get out of demo day also, right? So besides, I think, just the format, right, and the structure of how we run demo days, is also who do we want in the audience, right? Who do we want there that's valuable to the founders? So a lot of these questions start coming up. Are you actually actively fundraising, or are you actually here to meet potential partners and, clients, right? And then we rethink the way we market and who we're trying to attract to this demo day as well. On top of that, I think it has been very I think the way things has always been, okay, founders pitch for a few minutes, then next founder comes up, and then after everybody networks and then they visit the booth, right? It is very standard demo day, like pretty much that's what we see at demo days nowadays. But we also started to rethink the way we run that. Is really this method of pitching the most interesting, right? Are there ways we can curate different meetings? Are there ways that we can help the founders be able to present their business in a more effective manner? So there's a lot of that what we think about also. And then preparing founders for demo day, I think recently we started thinking about whether or not, a big part of your accelerator is actually helping founders prepare for demo day. Is demo day the best way for them to get money, or is it from the beginning, the introductions that we make for them, the meetings that we set up for them, the meeting they set up for themselves as they learn through the accelerator, is that also more effective in helping them raise money? So a lot to rethink. We are learning. I think one of the key things is constantly taking feedback throughout the accelerator, where the founders realize, I don't actually know how to, like Leonard said, set up a financial model. I don't know how to manage my cap table. I don't know what that means. How do I set a valuation for myself? So we start thinking about all these things, right? If the founders themselves don't have this knowledge throughout the accelerator, even at demo day, after they pitch, they're not going to have that knowledge. So I think it's also setting them up for success and what that looks like to them.
Thanks, Carrie. I think that makes a lot of sense. And also something that I think to add there, even from my perspective, since I deal more with investor education programs, is cultivating the right investor audience way before a demo day and making sure that you have those relationships built in so that the investors know when you're inviting them that you're a quality organization, you're going to offer quality pitches. And I think that's really important too. So you just have an audience that is ready to come and you're not looking last minute for people who could possibly come and be interested. So I think that also goes a long way. Lucia or Leonard, I'll let you just have a last word on demo day, and then I would like to open it up to Q&A.
Yeah, just really quickly going off on what you were saying, Vanessa, in terms of the guest list, like, you know, many times we get so caught up into just numbers. Oh, we want just like hundreds and hundreds of people in our demo day. But I think that choosing quality over quantity, and I'm not saying that it's like, you know, like just the general audience is not necessarily like quality audience, but it's mainly just like strategic. Like if you're thinking of like the founders and as you're preparing them, what makes more sense for them to, like what audience makes more sense for them to be pitching to, that also helps them in like preparing mentally, like adding the stuff in their pitches that is going to be more strategic as they understand who the audience will be, and not just necessarily like open to everybody where there's kind of like a variety of different participants. So I think just being strategic into your guest lists and like you said, curating it ahead of time, not waiting until the very end to just have people organically sign up, but like actually working on those relationships is also very important. And then just double clicking on what Carrie said about do not focus just on getting them to demo day, is everything that comes after demo day as well, where once they have the investor meeting set up, like, do they know how to conduct them correctly? So just also setting them up with the tools that they need to have a successful post-demo day and not just the pitch or the moment of the presentation in the event.
No, that makes sense, just because it's a little bit superficial if it's just this really nice package presentation, but then the substance underneath is what happens afterward when you're having those real conversations, because that's where due diligence comes into play and just really helps them close those deals. Thank you so much, Carrie, Lucia, Leonard. I'm going to open it up to some questions. So for the audience, if you haven't asked anything through Q&A yet, now is your chance. We do have two really great questions to start us off. So from Lena, I think this is a really great point because we are running programs, so it's all about the nitty-gritty. But Lena is asking, how do you recommend accelerator managers and directors navigate the day-to-day while still keeping vision level improvements and up levels on the radar? And they're a newish accelerator, so they would like to know maybe percentage-wise how they divide that time. I think that's really important and a great question. Thanks, Lena. I'll let either of you take it, whoever raises their hand first.
I can take it and Carrie and Leonard can add to it. But I mean, obviously not every team has the right or the opportunity to have like more than one person or more than two people in a team. But I think one way that we do this is by making sure that we have program managers, program coordinators, maybe a program director, or whoever is in the team, making sure that they have complementary skills. So if we have, you know, a team member that is focusing more on the strategic side of things, more like on the mentors and the curriculum, you know, like being able to give them the reins of running with that. Well, we also have some people that are fantastic at operations and, you know, they get everything done. They're like just on top of everything. So just as you're like looking at your team makeup, obviously making sure that you're like hiring people that can do everything so that when you put them together, you do have kind of like a powerhouse there. Anything to add, Carrie or Leonard?
I can add a little bit. I think what Lucia is saying is if you're lucky enough to have a team, right? Which we are sometimes in certain countries. There are places that we go into and we actually don't have a team yet because we're still looking for really good people on the ground. So what we do then, I think, is prioritize, right? What is important for us to spend most of our time on? For example, is it marketing, recruiting, and being able to get the right deal flow of the startups and then getting them into the program? Or is it curriculum design? Can we then work with, you know, other people within the company to do that, right? So I think it's also about where we put our priorities. when we think about, what we're looking at. So I think to answer, Lina's question, there is no percentage, right? It's at this point in time, what's most crucial for you to deal with? Like we said, it's putting out fires, right? And then also what is crucial for you to spend your time thinking about and working on. And then if there's anything, if anybody you can hire or even bring in to help you with the smaller things, that's really, really good, right? So finding your right team is also important, like Lucia said.
Thank you. Oh, we're getting some really great questions. So I'm going to keep going because I would love to answer as many as possible, or at least a little sampling from our perspective. So Sam has a great question. So for non-investing accelerators, how do you wrangle your companies to keep on top of things like monthly updates, surveys, other forms? And I think that's really the that's in the weeds, and it's perfect because that's what we do. And it's very practical. So I would love for any of you to jump in there as well.
That one is something that we're still trying to figure out. I think that when you don't have, the investment carrot in front of them, it is a little bit harder. I would say, one way is utilizing or finding that soft power. So we talked about the superpower, which is, what your accelerator can do, but soft power, and this is more like a political term, is like maybe like the different things that you can do that still help you have an impact in their lives without like investment. So investment is just part of it, but having great mentors that they can connect with, and they develop that relationship with the mentor. That way, like you can use the mentor for accountability purposes. So instead of you or the program manager being the one, typing like, please fill out the survey, getting the mentors to do it, they see them as like this help or relationship. So maybe just finding ways to like have them connect with you, or like even you as a program manager taking the time to get more involved with them, or talking to them, or kind of developing that friendship. I feel like that always comes handy when they're not just involved and invested on the academic side, but they're also kind of invested with you as a team. So I think this is where one of those unintended consequences of great community is that they just feel the need to just continue to be involved. And there's different things that you can also do, even though it's not investment. Like, I don't know, like the structure of your organizations, but if there's like anything that you can add, for instance, like access to like a certain event, or like extra mentorship sessions, or like, one meeting with like a marketing team to kind of like go over your marketing plan. There's like those little things that maybe you can add to add value. I think that those are always good to help people be a little bit more engaged, but a lot of experimentation there and trying to figure out what could be good ways for them to find that intrinsic motivator and not just be motivated by investment, which is something extrinsic.
Thanks, Lucy. I think that's a great term, just that soft power of being able to encourage in the best way possible for everyone's optimal outcome. And I know we're a little bit over, but I would like to maybe answer one or two more questions that I think the audience had. I thought they were very on point for this conversation. What are some of the best ways you keep program alumni engaged? Is it regular meetups, optional sit-in sessions? If someone could tackle that just very briefly, just one or 2 points of maybe what has worked for you in your experience.
I can jump also if none of you have anything, even though Carrie, I know you've had good success with alumni, but for instance, we just finished our second batch of the Alberta Accelerator in Canada. And I think that team has done a fantastic job of keeping the alumni engaged. One thing that we did was starting an alumni program where they get to come in as not necessarily mentors, but like kind of like this level of like, they're still sharing their like learnings, and they're like giving like that wisdom and knowledge transfer. And I think that empowers them to also feel like there's something that they're giving back as well. In the first batch, they were part of the ones that were receiving, now they're giving back. So I feel like that has really worked out well for us. And then events. So like we just had a founders retreat. So in the founders retreat, we brought in the current batch members, but we also invited all of the alumni. So just helping the batches connect as you have like the iteration of the programs is a really good way to keep them engaged, because they're not like siloed, but they all feel that community, that they're part of the Alberta Accelerator, not necessarily by batches. So those are some examples.
Yeah, I think peer learning model and just being able to make those connections, I really think that community is a two-way street. It's not just what we can give them, but also what they can give back. And I think that also just makes it for a very healthy community. And like you're saying, it's them coming, sharing their own learnings with the next batch and really passing that on. So I think that's just a really powerful model, and it's makes it for just a very healthy environment. I think last question, and then I'm going to wrap up today's panel. So I think this one's interesting because it deals with demo day and just about every accelerator, you know, kind of having their own secret sauce, if you will. So the question is, how do you handle competitors that try to join your demo day just to observe your program, your company, or your startups? Is there something that you think is a general guideline? I think this is just good to know as there's new ecosystems and marketplaces. So I think everyone kind of has this question about how to collaborate and what things to potentially hold back.
Anybody else?
Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. I don't know if it will come from a place of us feeling like we're too confident if I say like, you know, it's okay, let them come, right? Because I'm going to probably go to theirs as well. And I think it's good to learn from one another, right? That's one thing. Second thing is we've actually been really happy when we've heard people tell us, oh, this was such an amazing demo day. I'm going to bring this back and learn from this and do it in my own place, my own country, my own accelerator. Then I feel good, like we have taught the ecosystem something, right? And also every demo day is different, right? Not just because the founders pitching are different, your audience is different. Every city you're in requires, I think, a different, you know, touch to it as well. And you have your own secret sauce. And if you're able to bring that, and if someone else is going to learn that and then do better than you, then I think it's thinking like a startup as well, right? How can then you do better the next time, right? So I would say that it's not competition, honestly. I think don't be worried. If you're confident in your own show, you're confident in your own founders and the things you do, let them come, right? Because then you can also learn from them as the way they learn from you. However, that being said, we do have, I think we have put in place certain things that we have done. What we've tried to avoid are not accelerator competitors, but other kinds of startups or vendors that provide services to startups that want to come to demo day in order to, I think, be able to hang out with the kind of investors that we invite. And that might take attention away from the startups that you are trying to put on stage. So that's something that we do try and avoid. And we do look at the list of people who RSVP, because if people are just coming here to sell to your audience, sell to your founders or your investors, then I think that takes the limelight and spotlight away from your founders who you are putting on stage that very day. So that's one thing that we do try to avoid.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. It's something that we get a question for as well for the upcoming program that we run, the Bootcamp for Accelerator Managers, which is also where I will end a bit, just because people ask, you know, if we come to this program, what if I'm giving away too many top secret things from our accelerator? And I think our response has always been that Silicon Valley has had quite an open culture, and it's really about the team that can execute the best, which is also the founder mentality. So I think that we can all collaborate, and that it's up to us as well to implement and really uphold our own standards, and that it's great to learn from each other as well. So with that said, thank you so much, Carrie, Lucia, Leonard, for joining our panel today. I hope that these responses, these open conversations have been helpful to our audience of accelerator managers. I would like to close and just share again a little bit about the upcoming program we have in San Francisco coming up this January 2023. So we run a program called Bootcamp for Accelerator Managers. So this is where we, 500, are sharing our best practices, our frameworks, our learnings for running accelerators for over 10 years, and really condensing it into a program where we can share more of these details like we discussed today, but in greater conversation, in deeper detail with our participants. And so we run this program for a few years, and we're finally back after COVID as well, another in-person example. So today we would like to encourage you that if you are interested, there is still time to apply for early admissions. And so Chris will put in the chat the link there for applications, and then you'll be able to come in person and actually learn from people like Carrie, Lucia, Leonard. We'll probably have them there as our instructors, so that way they can dive more into these topics of how to build the right mentor network, how to build the right type of demo day for your audience, how to identify your superpower, and then all of the accelerators at the end actually do a presentation to our exec team on your accelerator thesis and get feedback. So it's been a really cool program for us to empower different ecosystems. And so that is also the last note that I would love to end on. Thank you, everyone. It's been great to have you.